Welcome to Dave Talks Comics, the program where I talk about comic books, cartoons, and comic book conventions. This is episode 135. All past episodes can be streamed or downloaded from the program's website, davetalkscomics.com. In addition to the program's website, this podcast program can also be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook. You can find my notes on what I have read at davetalkscomicsnotes.blogspot.com. I'm still getting caught up on the podcast as I continue to read comic books. On this episode, I'm going to start, but probably not finish, talking about the comic books I read in July, August, and September of 2016. So I've decided to do this part of my review of what I read in 2016 a little differently. I'm not going to talk about everything. There's a lot of stuff that I read in this 3-month stretch, July, August, and September. And, when I say a lot, there was a lot of different books. It doesn't necessarily mean I read a lot of those books, but there was a lot of different books. So maybe 1 issue of this, 2 issues of that, and so on and so forth. So I made the list. I went through and I made a list, and I decided I picked out a few things that I want to talk about in more depth, in more detail. And then there's everything else. Well, everything else can then be divided into 2 parts. On the one hand, you've got a couple things which I actually talked about on previous episodes of the podcast. And then you've got all the things that I have not talked about on the podcast and that I don't want to talk about at any great length. So I think I'm going to start with those first. So this is going to be part 1 of part 4 of Dave Talks Comics in 2016. And I'm calling this Quick Shots. So I've just written down a very few words about this. I've got more written down at my notes blog, but I've just written down a few words about this. And I'm going to try and keep this to just a couple minutes per comic book. So the first book is Ghostopolis by Doug TenNapel. This is an original graphic novel. I believe it first came out in 2010. It's about a boy named Garth who gets pulled into the afterlife by accident, and a ghost hunter named Frank Gallows, along with some help from some other people, including, I think, either his ex-girlfriend or his ex-fiancée, goes after Garth to try and retrieve him from the afterlife. There's also a twist on that, in that Garth has some sort of chronic illness, and so he only has so long to live. So he was going to die anyway, but now he's in the afterlife, and they go after him. I really like the art. This is only the second book of Doug TenNapel's that I've read. The other one being Creature Tech, which I really like both the art and the story from. This one, I wasn't as crazy about the story. I really didn't. The story was just kind of a little all over the place. It felt like it was going in one direction, then it felt like it was going in another direction. It just, ultimately, it did not work for me. There was little bits in there that I liked, but it didn't work for me. I liked the art. I liked the look of the book. I got it at a very reasonable price during a Comixology sale, so I was reading a digital copy of it. But I can't say I really recommend it. So that's Ghostopolis by Doug TenNapel. Marvel Double Shot number 3 by Sean McKeever and Darwin Cook. This book actually has 2 stories in it. I'm just talking about one of them, and that's the story called Who Let the Dad Out? And this story is 11 pages long. I read it because it was drawn by Darwin Cook. I read it because I believe it was mentioned on an episode of Murd's Time Bubble, another podcast, one of the Comic Geek Speak podcasts. And I had never heard of it, this particular issue. And so I was curious to see what it was like. And basically the main character is Scott Lang, Ant-Man, who was played by, I can't remember the name of the actor who played him in the movie. Paul Rudd, was that it? I think that's what it was. And it's not set in the present. It's set when his daughter is still much younger. I believe she's supposed to be 11 years old, and she has been invited to a party at which there's going to be both boys and girls, and he's nervous about this, and so he ends up spying on her, and It's not a great story. I enjoyed it. It's very harmless. It's not very serious at all. It's kind of fun. The facial expressions are great. So that's Marvel Double Shot number 3, Who Let the Dad Out story. I believe there's another story in there, but I didn't read it. I read this on Marvel Unlimited. Yes, I believe it's available through Marvel Unlimited. Star Spangled Comics number 48. Now, this came out in September of 1945, and I wasn't reading the entire issue because I believe this was basically an anthology comic, like a lot of comic books were at that time. But the story I was reading from this was the Robot Man story, which was called Crooks on Ice by Joe Samachson, and who was the writer, and the art was by Jimmy Thompson. I enjoyed it. It's probably not everybody's cup of tea. It's a little different. It's definitely a little more refined, the look of the art. Quite often Golden Age art to me looks very rough and very I don't know, it looks like they just aren't sure what they're doing. A lot of the Golden Age art. Not all of it, but a lot of it. But I'd say this is definitely an exception. If you can find this stuff, these stories, and there are digital collections out there, and that's how I found this, and not on Comixology either, but somebody has scanned a bunch of these and put them together, and you can get them for a very reasonable price. But some of these stories are fun, some of them are better than others, but the art is definitely fun to look at and excellent. Avengers numbered 95 and 97. These are from 1971 and 1972. These are the last 3 issues of the Kree-Skrull War, which began in issue 89. So it had been, about 9 issues that it ran for. The art is by Neil Adams and Tom Palmer and John Buscema and Sal Buscema, and it was definitely the highlight of the story. It's, in one way, it's kind of unfortunate that they changed it up. On the other hand, I really did like the art by the different teams, although, I don't know, there's no real justification. Like, it's not like this part of the story is taking place here and you have this artist drawing it, and this part of the story is taking place here or there, and so you have this artist drawing it. It's just, I guess it was whoever was available. There's probably a story behind there, and the story may have been told somewhere. I'm not sure, but I really like the look of the art. All 3 of them, they all have their strengths to them. The story itself I found to be a bit lacking. It felt like it was building up to something, and then all of a sudden it ended very abruptly. There's some nice little episodes within the overall story. This was my first time and the only time that I've read the Kree-Skrull War. It's something that I'd heard about for years and years, and I think I'd read a little bit of it, but it didn't really do it for me. Not as a story, and it's not something that I see myself going back and reading in the future. Speaking of things that I don't think I'm going to go back and read again, although I may finish off the story because I only read 3 issues in this time frame of this story, and that is Punisher issues 2, 3, and 4. This is from 2000. And this is part of the Welcome Back Frank story by Garth Ennis, Steve Dillon, and Jimmy Palmiotti. Garth Ennis is very hit and miss with me, and this is definitely a miss. I really don't care for this story. I like the art, and that's probably the only reason I've gone back to read it. And when I say go back to read it, what I mean is I read the first issue and I was kind of and then I went back and read the next 3 issues, and later on I went back and read a couple more issues, and I keep hoping that there's something in here that will grab me, something more than just the look of the book, something more than just the facial expressions, the way that Steve Dillon and Jimmy Palmiotti draw the story. But so far, there isn't. I just kind of shrug my shoulders at the story. It just seems, I don't know, it's not worth spending time on, is how I feel. Green Lantern number 40. This is from October of 1965. This is written by John Broome with art by Gil Kane and Sid Green. I read this after reading some of the Legion of Superheroes stories because there was some reference to Krona, the villain, the villain, not the villain who was behind Crisis on Infinite Earths, but who was partly responsible for what happened in Crisis on Infinite Earths. This was the first appearance of Krona. This was the first team-up of the Green Lanterns of Earth 1 and Earth 2. I read it in what did they call it? There was the Crisis on Multiple Earths series, and then they did, which were reprints of the team-ups of the Justice League of America and the Justice Society of America, all of which I believe appeared in issues of JLA, Justice League of America. And I guess after they did all of those, they then went back and did reprints of some of the earlier team-ups of individual members. And so they did a couple volumes of team-ups, and in one of them they reprinted, like of the Flash of Earth 1 and the Flash of Earth 2, the Green Lanterns of Earth 1 and Earth 2, and there were some other team-ups that weren't necessarily the same hero on both Earths. But so I think it was the first volume of that, and I actually only read this one story. I would like to go back and read some of the other stories. A few of them I've read before, but not all of them. So this story, I really wasn't too crazy about it. Like I said, I read it because it was the first appearance of Krona. I can't even say it was a great story. It was just so crazy. I mean, some of the explanations were just so off the wall. I tried to go through, and I think I did go through, and if you go to my notes block, you'll see this. I did go through and kind of detail what happens in the story, but none of it is really, I don't know, it doesn't appeal to me on any level. It's kind of funny, I don't know, I want to say sad, but I don't think sad is exactly the right word to describe this. But it's just, I find it lacking, and I really didn't want to write about it. On the other hand, I'm kind of glad that I read it. I can say that I read it now. I sometimes like to go back and read these things for historical reasons, even though I may not really get that much out of them. At least I can say I've read them, I know what they are, and it's, my knowledge of them is now firsthand and not secondhand. I'm not just repeating something that I read in an article or that I overheard somebody say on a podcast about an old comic book. I've actually read it. Ghost World by Dan Clowes. This, I believe, came out in 1993. This is one of those books that is, I think, considered I don't know if classic is the right word, maybe seminal is the right word. It's definitely a very well-known independent comic book. I had never read it before. I picked it up, I think, at Heroes Con a couple years ago, and had been sitting on my shelf since then, like a lot of the books I buy at these conventions do. So I finally picked it up and read it, and it's a story of two teenage girls, Enid and Rachel. They're either I think it's just after they've graduated from high school, maybe it's supposed to be the summer after they graduated from high school, and they're kind of trying to figure out what to do with their lives, to make their lives more interesting, where they're going. I had a hard time connecting with this. It wasn't bad. It wasn't awful. It just didn't really connect with me. I think in part it's not so much the fact that they're female as much as it is the setting, that it's set not in a big city, or it doesn't feel like it's a big city, but it feels like, out in the suburbs somewhere, or, not in a big city, as I said before. Which I had trouble relating to some of this. I don't know. And then after I read the book, I watched the movie, which is kind of the same, but it's different. And I don't think I like the movie any more than I like the book. And as I've written in my notes here, I wasn't crazy about the movie, and I had trouble connecting with the book, which is what I said before. Fury Max #1 This came out in July of 2012. This was written by Garth Ennis with art by Goran Parlov. I believe this was a 13-issue series. This first issue was part one of a 3-issue arc called Indochina 1954. I wasn't crazy about it. It felt generic Cold War, felt like a generic Cold War story that they put Nick Fury into. It felt like a story that I've kind of read before. I just had trouble. It's not that I couldn't understand what it was. It was more like I've read this story before. I've seen this story before. Why are you telling this story with Nick Fury? What's the point? The art, I liked the art for the most part. There was one thing that they did in the art that I didn't like, which was they had these panels that stretched, that were thin in that they weren't very tall, but they stretched the width of the page. And for some reason that threw me off. And I think it was possibly because they did a lot of that. It wasn't so much that there was some of it, but that there was a lot of it. So I liked the look of the art for the most part, but I didn't really have any interest in continuing to read this. And so I haven't tried to find the rest of this arc or the rest of the series, which, as I said, only ran for 13 issues. Amiculus Volume 2 by Travis Horseman and Giancarlo Caracuzzo. This came out in 2016. This is the second part of 3 of a bigger story. So this story basically has 3 arcs to it, or at least it's being released in 3 parts. And this is the second part. It doesn't make any sense to read this by itself. And I believe before I read this, I went back and I reread part 1. Or wait, no, I don't think I did, because I think I had trouble finding part 1. This is a book I got through Kickstarter. It's about the fall of the Roman Empire in 476. And it's told in 2 parts, or it's told in, well, not in 2 parts, but there's basically 2 storylines going. There's what happened in 476, and there's what happened, I think it's supposed to be 75 years later. Somebody has been sent from the Eastern Empire to Rome to figure out what happened. And so you're getting these 2 storylines running through this story. For the most part, I like it. It's interesting. The 3rd part should be out soon. I believe when I looked at their website, which is amiculusrome.com, and the 3rd part's supposed to be out in the spring. I think it said late spring of 2017, and, well, it's spring of 2017. And we've only got about another month left of spring of 2017. So hopefully that will be out soon. I have ordered the 3rd part, so I'm looking forward to reading that. Bury the Past by E. Baird. This is a book that I picked up at the Small Press Expo last year. It was a Western. It's a mini comic. It's available online for free. I don't really have a whole lot else to say about it other than that. I was intrigued by the look of the artwork when I bought it, but after reading it, I just wasn't really taken. I really wasn't. I wasn't impressed. I wasn't very interested in reading more, but there is more available if you Google Bury the Past, E. Baird, and mini comics, I believe, online for free. Space Captain by Michael Park and Chris Baldy, issues 1 through 3. This is another book that I did pick up at the Small Press Expo last year in 2016. This is one that I did like. I know there's a lot here that have said, too. This is one that I did like, and I thought was really cool. The main character is called Space Captain. He doesn't have any name other than that, or at least through the first 3 issues, he has yet to be given a name other than Space Captain. He is a man out of time. He wakes up after sleeping for 1,000 years to discover that everyone and everything that he knew is gone. He is the last human, and because he's the last human, there's something special about him, about in his DNA or something like that, or in human DNA, that there are bounty hunters, obviously not humans, aliens, who chase after him. He has memories of his life before, memories of his wife and his child, memories, nightmares about something that happened to him between the time, because he did not go to sleep voluntarily. He went into this deep freeze, and then somebody finds him, and he gets thawed out, kind of, I guess, like Captain America, but it's not a superhero story. But then he goes on this quest to get back to Earth, and I think it's a good story. I think the characters are interesting. I like the way it's drawn. I like the way it's put together. I hope that I can get some more issues of this. And and it's the entire story, I believe, is going to be 6 books long. Each book is about, a regular comic book in length, although the way they were printed a little smaller than a comic book, more like a digest size, although maybe somewhere in between a digest size and a comic book size. But there's supposed to be 6 parts in all. I think part 4 is going to be out sometimes this year, and I don't know if part 5 is going to be out this year, maybe, and part 6 next year, something like that. Oh, and you can find out more about Space Captain at spacecaptain.co.uk, and they do have the first issue available for free online. Heartbreak Soup, Cello's Burden. This is by Gilbert Hernandez. I also bought this at the Small Press Expo last year. I started to read it immediately after the Small Press Expo, and I only read the first story, and then I put it down, and I have yet to get back to it. And it's not because I didn't like the story. I did. It introduces some characters, Cello, who's a midwife, and a couple guys who are brothers, although only brothers in the sense that I think that they were born on the same day. So they aren't biological brothers. And their names are Soledad and Manuel. And that's all I've got to say about this. And that's I hope to read more of Heartbreak Soup. I hope to read more of other stories by the Hernandez brothers, because they really do great work. This one, of course, is just by Gilbert. So that's it for part 1 of this podcast, and that's it for the quick shots. So now I'm going to go into past shots, and these are a couple things that I read that I've already talked about on the podcast. The first one is Iron Man issues 6 through 8. These came out October through December of 1968. These were written by Archie Goodwin with art by George Tuska and Johnny Craig. And I talked about these issues on episode 121 of the podcast. Next is Legion of Superheroes number 295. This is called The Origin of the Universe file. This originally came out in January of 1983, and I talked about it on episode 126 of the podcast. And then there's Legion of Superheroes number 296, cover dated February of 1983, which is called What Do You Do on the Day After Doomsday? And I talked about that on episode 131 of the podcast. That's it for part 2. Now, part 3 is what I'm calling Best Shots, because these are the stories that I like the best. And I'm probably only going to cover one of these stories, and I'll leave the rest for the next episode of the podcast. And that story is a Captain America story. It's from Tales of Suspense numbers 79 to 81. Tales of Suspense number 79 was titled The Red Skull Lives. It was written by Stan Lee with art by Jack Kirby and Frank Giacoia. It was cover dated July of 1966. And in this issue, at this point, Tales of Suspense, actually I think for most of its run, Tales of Suspense had at least 2 stories in it. And at this point, it was split between Captain America and Iron Man. And I believe I talked about the Iron Man stories from this. Oh, no, I didn't. No, I'm getting a couple things mixed up. No, I didn't talk about the Iron Man stories from this issue. I don't think I've read the Iron Man stories from this issue. But so there's an Iron Man story, then there's a Captain America story. I'm just talking about the Captain America story. And in this story, the Red Skull tries to frame Captain America for murder, and at the same time make him think that he's going insane using some high-tech hypnotic device. which he has his goons wear, which makes them invisible to everybody except for Captain America. And so Cap sees them, and Cap starts striking out at them, and people think that Captain America's crazy because nobody else can see these people. And they don't try to say that it's some kind of technology that makes them invisible. It's something that makes, I don't know, cast some sort of a hypnotic spell on everybody except for Captain America, which seems a bit strange to me, but still. I love the premise, and I love the execution, especially Kirby's visual storytelling in this. It's a little wacko. It's kind of funny. I mean, at one point, Captain America goes, I think, to a psychiatrist or to a doctor, and tries talking to him, and then the bad guys show up again. Of course, the doctor can't see the bad guys. And, of course, he wins over in the end, but this is just part one of this 3-part story. Also worth noting is that this is the first Silver Age appearance of the Red Skull, which is set in the present. Prior to this, all the other Silver Age appearances of the Red Skull took place during World War II, because I don't think it might have been immediately before this. No, it wasn't immediately before this. But for a while, the Captain America stories and Tales of Suspense were set during World War II. Tales of Suspense number 80 is called He Who Holds the Cosmic Cube. And this is basically, this storyline is, in addition to being the return of the Red Skull, it is also the introduction of the Cosmic Cube, a device of extreme power which I believe plays a role in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I'm not sure. I know it has certainly played a role in a number of major storylines over the years. But this is the first appearance of the Cosmic Cube. This issue was written by Stan Lee with art by Jack Kirby and Don Heck, and is cover dated August of 1966. In this issue, Cap chases an agent of the Red Skull who's stolen the Cosmic Cube from AIM, that's Advanced Idea Mechanics, and he plans to give it to his boss, the Red Skull, this agent. So Cap has to chase this guy. This guy takes off in a jet plane. Cap gets a ride on a missile. I believe it's supposed to be an intercontinental ballistic missile. So he's riding on the side of a missile, just holding on with his hands. And he jumps off the missile. He jumps on the plane. He breaks into the plane. He forces the pilot to eject, this agent to eject. They're fighting as they're going down in this parachute. They wind up on an island. But unfortunately, Cap's a little too slow and is unable to. And on this island is where the agent was supposed to rendezvous with the Red Skull. But unfortunately, the Red Skull, the agent is able to get the Cosmic Cube to the Red Skull. So this whole issue is just kind of fun and ridiculous, the whole bit, with Captain America riding on the side of this missile and then jumping off the missile and jumping onto a jet plane. But hey, it's a comic book. It's a lot of fun. It isn't very long. You know, these stories are like about 10, 12 pages long, these half-issue stories. Definitely worth, well, in my opinion, worth checking out. I'm glad I finally got to read this. But wait, I've got one more part to this story. And that's from Tales of Suspense number 81. And this one is called The Red Skull Supreme. And this one's written by Stan Lee with art by Jack Kirby and Frank Giacoia, and was cover dated September of 1966. In this one, Cap and the Red Skull battle, but the Red Skull has the Cosmic Cube in his hand, and ultimately he's too powerful for Captain America. Captain America has to do something else, so he grovels and begs for his life because the Red Skull is about to kill him, and manages to confuse or to distract the Red Skull enough and get close enough to him to knock the Cosmic Cube out of his hand. As the Red Skull is reaching for the Cosmic Cube, he gets his hands on it. Captain America also gets his hands on it. The Red Skull uses the power of the cube to break apart this island. Everything's falling apart. The cube once again falls out of his hands. He goes reaching for it, and he goes falling into the sea and seems to be killed. Well, of course, he wasn't killed because he does come back. It seems like the Cosmic Cube is lost forever, but it isn't, because it does come back in the future. And of course, this is just the first story that the Cosmic Cube shows up in. This whole thing was a lot of fun. There is some real wackiness in this part of the story. In this issue, there's this part where the Red Skull uses the power of the Cosmic Cube to create a suit of golden armor for himself, and he says he's going to create a new round table like King Arthur had, and a new Knights of the Round Table, and Captain America is groveling and begging to serve him, and it's just nuts. It's crazy, but it's just the way Kirby draws it, and then there's this other sequence. There's a page where the Red Skull is dreaming about the things he can do with the Cosmic Cube, and creating an intergalactic empire. It's just nuts. But I really love this story, and it's a lot of fun. It's a quick read. It's probably less than the length of 2 regular-sized comic books these days. It's stretched over 3 issues. You can find it on Marvel Unlimited, and it's been reprinted numerous times in various editions, in Essentials, in Marvel Masterworks, and possibly in a couple other places. So that's it for episode 135. Episode 136 is going to be more of the same, with me talking about more of what I read and possibly what I watched in July, August, and September of 2016. Dave Talks Comics can be found at davetalkscomics.com, as well as on iTunes, Stitcher, and a few other locations. You can keep up with what I have been currently reading at davetalkscomicsnotes.blogspot.com, and what I've been watching at smallscreenscrawls.blogspot.com. Links to both of these blogs can be found at davetalkscomics.com under the Other Blogs header on the right-hand side of the page. If you have comments or questions, I can be reached at davetalkscomics@gmail.com, on Twitter at davetalkscomics, or leave a comment on my website. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.